Welcome to you all. My name is Andrew Chung, artistic producer of London Symphonia, and today I have with me the music director of the Fresno Philharmonic and our guest conductor for Janina Fialkowska Plays Chopin. We've got Rei Hotoda. Welcome, Rei.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you.
We're really looking forward to working with you this week on this repertoire. So, just for our listeners, this week of this concert, we have a number of opportunities to hear from our guest artist and pianist, Janina Fialkowska. There will be a master class at the Music Building at Western University from 2 to 4 p.m. on Wednesday, January 24th, where Janina will be working with young pianists from the faculty. And there will be a guest artist talk also held at Western on Thursday, the 25th at 7:30, where Janina will speak about her memoir, A Note in Time. So today, Rei, I'm wondering if we can spend a bit of time talking about Louise Farrenc and the Second Symphony that we will be about to embark on together. So being one yourself who champions the work of female composers, are these three symphonies of Louise Farrenc familiar to you?
This is my first time embarking on the music of Louise Farrenc, so I'm very excited to perform with the London Symphonia, the Second Symphony. So, Louise, I'm just really excited to dig into just a little bit about her. Even she's such an incredible feminist of the 19th century. Um, really basically living from 1804 to 1875. A lot of changes happening in the world, in music, in classical music, in music in Europe, especially. So I feel that the audiences will really be surprised hearing this symphony.
Hmm. And it seems that being female in the early to mid 19th century, she was allowed to study piano at the Paris Conservatoire, but she wasn't allowed to be a composition student. And so she took from the top composers, she learned, but it was all done independently. What do we make of this?
Well, it's interesting. She had incredible support from her family. And I think, that's something that's was essential in her becoming an artist that she did become and writing all of these works. And as a pianist, I think that, she was able to perform, but why was she, not able to compose? That just does not make any sense to me. Uh, but we think of music and we think that music has no bounds, but it actually is wonderful to showcase a woman composer who really pushed the boundaries in her field as a woman during the time that she lived. And I think it's time that we really celebrate these composers. I think of like Clara Schumann or Amy Beach, also wonderful pianists who were kind of marginalized as composers. And I feel that if Louise had even more opportunities as a symphonist, that we would see more of her works. And as we can see with Haydn's over 100 symphonies, you get better each time you write a symphony, And I think that given the parameters and the boundaries that she had to face during that time, to write so creatively with so much counterpoint, using the orchestra really for the only like three times that she wrote the three symphonies to really experiment. I just give so many kudos to her. I just think that she's a success that needs to be performed more.
A real trailblazer. I mean, you think that so she's not allowed to study composition at the Paris Conservatoire, but they do appoint her as a professor of piano. And she is then the only female professor of piano in the entire 100 years of the 19th century at the Paris Conservatoire. A total trailblazer indeed. So Ferenc seems to be championing and focusing on the symphony in the 1840s.
Right.
I'm of the impression that this is not a popular route to be pursuing as a symphonist in France at that time. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. It's really interesting because music history classes that I took in under as an undergrad or even graduate classes, they don't talk about the composers that wrote after Beethoven Ninth Symphony, right? To Brahms' First Symphony, which was literally written 10 years after this work, Symphony No. 2 by Louise Farrenc. So they're always saying, well, Brahms' First Symphony is Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and all the symphonies in between that time, I don't know, are they pillars of the symphonic repertoire? And so I think that she really bridges that gap, like the Mendelssohn symphonies, like the Schumann symphonies, that gap between the classical and the romantic. So I find her music really fascinating in that way, that you could hear classical elements from like Beethoven, from even Haydn and Mozart, the transparency in the in instrumentation. But then you do hear these diminished seventh chords and all the things that people were starting to experiment, expanding the orchestral repertoire going into the latter half of the 19th century. So was it in fashion? I think it was safe for her to write a symphony, rather than a tone poem. And I think it was a way for her to train herself, like, okay, I'm going to take from Beethoven, what can I do with it? What can I add to it? Where is my voice in this? And then experiment that way. And being a brilliant pianist, I think that really helped her develop her own language.
So, Ray, do you hear very much Beethoven within this symphony?
I do hear influences of Beethoven. The first movement, in fact, reminds me a little bit of like the slow introductions that Beethoven would use, for instance, like in his Seventh Symphony. So she starts off with this really full orchestra playing, D major, and then it goes into the slow lyrical section before she goes into the allegro. So it's like she's setting us up for this Beethoven-like symphony, but it's a completely different language. Yes.
A language all her own. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that she really starts to play with the boundaries of classical music. Like, for instance, in the other movements, she'll slow down, or in the slow movement, in the third movement, she'll all of a sudden have this, intense, faster tempo. So I think she's really pushing the boundaries in that way.
Playing with our expectations. So just take me through the each movement a little bit. We talked a little bit about the first movement. What can people listen for in the second movement?
So the second movement is a slow movement, and again, she's testing. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like she's testing orchestration uh, ways to orchestrate differently, rather than it be like a Beethoven where the lower strings are playing, like in the slow movement of Beethoven's Seventh, or so she has the cellos and basses playing by themselves, just this kind of heartbeat, and then she adds the timpani to kind of move the disrupt this kind of boom boom, boom pulse, and then she goes into this kind of like it feels like a minuet type of slow dance, slow movement, and so that's beautiful. The third movement is a scherzo, which is my favorite movement. I don't know, how do you feel practicing that movement?
I love this movement. It's full of surprise and yeah, just the phrase lengths are a little unusual and yeah, I love this scherzo.
Yes, and what's interesting is that, like, I think of a classical scherzo, even Mendelssohn scherzos are really loud and fast and disruptive, but with hers, we start piano, so it's this kind of rumbling sound that's kind of coming from the background or coming from a distance, and then it comes to the forefront right away. So in that sense, I feel that's a little romantic. It's setting us up in a mood, rather than like, boom, here's a scherzo. Yeah,
What about this fourth movement and its nice slow kind of grand entrance?
right. I think that again, it's this. I believe it is an 8-bar introduction to the last movement. So it's as if it's a bit of a fanfare to me, kind of like calling everyone back to attention. Or we can think of the 19th century operas, where this grandiose opening and then the drama begins. So I feel that with her counterpoint, with her experimentation with orchestration, there are elements of the romantic era, but still with the confines of this classical period that she was, I think she was working out a lot of issues, not issues that she had problems with, but more just experimenting with her own language, with her own voice, with the orchestration that she did. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to work on the symphony. It's a familiar language with like an entirely new voice for us. Like how fun is that? I think it's great.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
let's take a few minutes to circle back to this Chopin Concerto #1 that we'll be performing with Janina. Now, our listeners may not know that you yourself are a concert pianist. So, what will this be like to collaborate on a piece that's been part of Janina's repertoire through pretty much the entire arc of her career?
Yes, well, I'm very much looking forward to working with Janina. I've heard so many wonderful things about her, and I've never had the opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to this concert. But I consider myself a lifelong learner. And when there is an expert on Chopin, and being a pianist, I respect that incredibly. So I think that I will learn something in her performance in our rehearsals together. And I hope to, convey that to the orchestra, but also that we are basically accompanying the soloist as an orchestra in concerto setting. And so, especially in Chopin with his orchestration, it's very sparse. It's very much piano forward, as opposed to maybe Tchaikovsky piano concerto, where you hear the orchestra really involved. We're really much in the background. And so I'm really, looking forward to how she will interpret certain passages, if she's going to move ahead, if she's going to, take a lot of time, maybe a little bit of time. Those kinds of things are really exciting for me as a pianist to hear what kinds of interpretations the soloist will come up with. And yeah, it'll be exciting.
And is it the kind of piece that you play through yourself or have played in the past, or how do you get
Good
familiar?
question. Yes, I've never learned this as a soloist, but as I'm preparing for next week, I'm having so much fun playing through some of the scales coming down where the orchestra connects again with the soloist. And of course, it's terrible. My playing is terrible. I haven't played the Chopin concerto, but it's just really fun to kind of vicariously, play through a couple of the easier passages and to enjoy that as a pianist. It's got so much meaning for me as a musician. Um, and I love Chopin's music. So this is a wonderful opportunity to marry the two disciplines together.
So what is it about Chopin's music that's given it its staying power? Like it's just, what is it that performers love about it that also seems to resonate just as much or maybe even more with the listener?
Exactly. Great question. I think Chopin's music is very much distinctive, meaning that when you hear 5 bars or a phrase of Chopin, it's Chopin. It's not going to be Liszt or Schumann. There's something very unique about his language, his background, Polish background. Some of that comes up, like in the last movement of the concerto. There's this really definite folk Polish element of a dance in it. So those kinds of things really draw the listener in. There's something so authentic about his music too. Even on all the filigree stuff that you hear these passages, like the left hand's doing a chromatic scale down, and you hear this like sound opening up in the piano where the right hand is going up and the left hand is going down, and it's just this incredible soundscape that is really definitive Chopin. And those scale passages, you and I are talking about it maybe being improvised sounding, but it's not, right? I mean, every single note is written out. And so I just find that they're like little pearls, and it just makes this gorgeous necklace.
But that improvised element or the sound of it being, this give and take, and it sounds inspired on the moment. Maybe that's where the opportunity is for the performer to imprint his or her musicality on these well-known works. Is that part of the equation here?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the timing. It's all about the timing of these runs, and when you end that phrase or when you move it, that really pulls us in as listeners and as musicians.
Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Rei. Really looking forward to working on these two pieces for you. This is Janina Fialkowska plays Chopin. This will be January the 27th at 7:30 at Metropolitan United Church. Thanks so much, Rei.
Thank you, Andrew. Looking forward to it.